This video is on comparing linear functions. This problem says given the function 4x plus 9y equals 24 and the function graph to the right, what is the distance between the x-intercepts? So the x-intercept, if we remember, x-intercept is when y is equal to 0. A y-intercept is when x is equal to 0. So we can use the same information to infer what an x-intercept is. X-intercept is when y is equal to 0. On the graph, we can easily see where this graph crosses both the x and y axis. We want the x-intercept where it crosses the x-axis. So on the graph, we have the coordinate of -5, 0. That's the x-intercept. So in the equation, how do we do this? Using this information, we don't have to graph anything. We don't have to put it in slope-intercept form. We can actually use this information of when y is equal to 0 to find our x-intercept. If we take this equation, 4x plus 9y equals 24, and we replace the y value with 0, we get 4x plus 9 times 0, which is 0, equals 24. Now all we really have is 4x equals 24. All we have is an x value, and we can solve for this x. To solve for this x, we would divide everything by 4. So x would equal to 6. The coordinate for the x-intercept for the equation would be 6, 0. So if I graph that, it'd be 6, 0 here. The distance between that is from -5 to 0, and then from 0 to 6, which is 11 units. So the distance between the x-intercepts is 11 units. Next, we have if f of x is described in the table below, and g of x has an x-intercept of -4/3, 0, and y-intercept of 0, 2, which has the greatest rate of change? So again, rate of change is asking for the slope. So for f of x in the table, we need to determine the slope from the table. So for f of x, we do, again, slope is change in y over change in x. So our f of x is y. So our change in y, so from -2 to -1 is adding 1. And for our x, from 2 to 4 is adding 2. So our change in y over a change in x is equal to a +1 over a +2. So for f of x, our slope is equal to 1/2. For g of x, we have two coordinates that we can still find our slope from. So for g of x, our change in y is going to be, so we have a 0 for our first y, minus, we have 2 for the next y. Divided by, we have -4/3 for our first x, minus 0 for our second x. 0 minus 2 is -2, divided by -4/3 minus 0 is -4/3. Now we have a fraction inside of a fraction. In order to do this, we actually multiply by the reciprocal. So we're going to take our -2, and instead of dividing it, we're going to multiply it by the reciprocal of -4/3, which is -3/4. So -2 is actually really over 1 now. So -2 times -3 is +6. 1 times 4 is +4. So our g of x slope becomes +3/2, which is 1/2. 1.5. F of x is just a slope of 1/2. So the one that has the greater rate of change would be g of x, because it has a rise of, or a change of y of 3 over a change of x of 2, while f of x has a change of y of 1 over the same change of x. So we have rise 1, this one is rise 3. So it would be g of x has a greater or has the greatest, has a greater rate of change. In this next problem, it says given f of x equals 7/6 x minus 11, and the function g of x contains the points -6, 9 and -3, 5. What is the distance between the y-intercepts? So we want to find the y-intercepts. So for f of x, we are already given slope-intercept form. Our y-intercept would be from our constant of this form, because we have y equals here. Our constant is -11, so our y-intercept is at 0, -11. For g of x, we have two coordinates, so we need to find the y-intercept. I'm going to do this by figuring out the entire slope-intercept form and finding the slope and then using that to help find the y-intercept. So we're going to use, for g of x, we have m equals, so our first y value is going to be 9 minus, the next y value is 5, divided by, our first x value will be -6 then, minus, the next x value is -3. So we have 9 minus 5 is +4, divided by -6 minus a -3 becomes -6 plus 3, which becomes -3. So our slope is -4/3. If we have our slope, we can use one of these coordinates and our slope to find our slope-intercept form. So if we use that y equals mx plus b, we can use one of the coordinates from the original, plug it in, and then we can find b, which is our constant. Let's use the -3, 5. So I'm going to write in the y value is the 5 from the coordinate, equals m is what we just found, is that -4/3, times x, so times the x from our coordinate is -3, and then plus b. We don't know what our b is, so we put plus b. So -4/3 times -3 is what we need to simplify. So we have 5 equals, this is over 1. -4 times -3 is a +12. 3 times 1 is 3. So we have a +12 divided by a +3, which is equal to a +4. And then adding b. So 4 plus what gives you 5? 4 plus 1 gives you 5. So b is equal to 1. So for g of x, our actual equation is equal to, g of x equals our coefficient, our slope, -4/3 x, and then our constant is the +1, so plus 1. This is actually g of x. So our g of x y-intercept, the constant was 1, so that would be 0, 1. The distance between -11 to 1, so it's from -11 to 0, is 11 spaces, and then one more space will be 12 spaces. So the distance between the y-intercepts is 12 units. This last problem says, given the function 2x minus 4y equals -8, and the function y equals -3/2 x plus 9, what is the distance between the x-intercepts? As a reminder, the x-intercepts is when y is equal to 0. So without graphing them, we can actually change our y values to 0 and solve for the x. So for this first one, 2x minus 4y equals -8. If we replace the 4 times y as 4 times 0, we'll be able to get our x-intercept. So we'll keep our 2x minus 4 times 0 is 0. So that'd be minus 0 equals -8. So we have 2x minus 0 is 2x equals -8. We're going to divide by 2 on both sides, so x is equal to negative 4. Our x-intercept for this would be negative 4, 0. This is our x-intercept for this first one, because we're replacing y with 0, because we know x-intercept is when y is 0. We'll do the same thing for this equation. We have y equals negative 3/2 x plus 9. So we're going to replace this with 0. The y is going to become 0. We have 0 equals negative 3/2 x plus 9. We're going to solve for x using SADMET. So we want to get the x alone. The negative 3/2 is multiplied to it. The 9 is added to it. So the 9 is what we want to focus on first. We're going to subtract the 9 on both sides. So we'll have negative 9 equals negative 3/2 x, and then nothing, because we subtracted the 9. Now to solve for x here, we actually want to multiply by the reciprocal of whatever is multiplied right now. So we're going to multiply both sides by a negative, because it's still the sign, 2 over 3. So we're going to multiply by negative 2/3 on both sides, because negative 3 and negative 2, that will multiply to give us a positive, but we'll have 3 divided by 3 gives us a 1, and 2 divided by 2 gives us a 1. So we'll end up with x equals negative 2 times negative 9, because this is over 1. Negative 2 times negative 9 is a positive 18, divided by a 3 times a 1 is a positive 3. So the x is equal to positive 6. So our x-intercept is 6, 0. The distance between the x-intercepts, so we wanted the distance between negative 4 and positive 6. So negative 4 to 0 is 4 steps. Because if we're, again, the reason why I say this is if we're looking at a number line, this is 0, this would be negative 4, this would be positive 6. This is 4 units from negative 4 to 0, and this is 6 units. So from negative 4 to 6 is a 10-unit difference. So the distance between the x-intercepts is 10 units.